Hello, dividend executives. Welcome back. Today, I wanted to go over a summary of the interview with Dave Mazza, the CEO of RoundHill Investments. There's some pretty telling things, some things you might already know, some things you might not have known, but there was a lot of good data in it, and so I thought it was probably a good idea to go over it. So let's jump into it. Obviously, I like to cover this because I own 100 shares of QDTE and 81 shares of XDTE, and will probably own another couple $1,000s worth of RDT when it is announced. So let's jump into it. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about QDTE today and XDTE, and I want to just showcase a couple of things here. First and foremost, these funds have obviously been a lot on Twitter, a lot on YouTube. People are covering them. Why? Well, because they have a pretty cool strategy. They are growing their AUM like crazy. You can see here on QDTE alone, the AUM is $223 million, and the expense ratio is at 0.95% or just under 1%. And they have taken the world by storm because they pay weekly dividends, and the NAV has actually been pretty decent so far. So if we look at the weekly dividends, we actually have one coming up here pretty soon. Ex-dividend date being 8/22, payout date 8/23, which is Friday, and it's going to pay 48 cents a share, which is in line with what they had last week. So let's jump into it. What are these funds? What are they trying to do? Well, we've talked about this many times. They sell deep in the money or they buy deep in the money calls to try and give you that full synthetic exposure as if you were to own the underlying stock, and they sell 0 DT calls each and every single day to try and generate income, and then they pass some of that income along to us in forms of a weekly dividend. So they've done this, they've shared this. You can go to their actual fund and you can see what options they have. You can see the calls they have long dated. You can see these two long dated calls right here for 6/20 of 2025 and 3/21 of 2025. But the cool part I wanted to show you is the intraday trades. They post this each and every single day, and you can check up on the fund. So you just come here, you download the fund, you open it up, and this is for today. We'll go over this a little bit in the spreadsheet, but as of today, 8/22, they have some calls open. They have the 990. They sold 125 lots at $31.70 per contract. So we'll go over that and what that means, but I just wanted to show you this is where you can find it if you do want to find it. Obviously I have it in the spreadsheet, and let me just pull that up here. But if you wanted to keep track of those, there is a way to find it, and you can track the wins and the losses each and every single week if you want to get into the nitty gritty. But let's talk about the actual fund. Let's talk about some of the things that went over in the call, right? So we know what they're doing. We know how they're making money. We showcase some of the calls you can see here on the screen. But what are they doing, right? So it's a fund that comes out and they try to balance the high income and the share appreciation. So a lot of funds have a huge NAV erosion, and this fund is trying, not saying they won't, but they're trying not to have as much NAV erosion. You can see here on QDTE, down 7.5% so far this year. So there has been some NAV erosion there. They did have a good time getting back up in July, but right now there's a pretty good NAV erosion on QDT. It is a higher dividend payer. When we look at XDTE, this sucker has basically had 0 NAV erosion. We're down 16 cents, which is basically just today's move. If we were to go to today, we're down 28 cents. So as of yesterday, we had 0 NAV erosion on this one, which is pretty cool because they paid a lot in dividends. So they're trying to balance the high income, which is the primary objective of this fund, is to pass high income along to its shareholders, and secondary objective is to protect the NAV, right? So they're trying to protect the NAV. They don't have a set delta that they talked about that they use every single day. And so they're just trying to manage the distribution to the shareholders, and they're trying to take and make money on the high volatility of the QQQ and the S&P 500. If you are new to this, XDTE is on the S&P 500, and then QDTE is on QQQ or the NASDAQ 100, right? So they actually sell it on a little bit different. They're called flex options, and they're using those. They're not traditional ETFs that we have exposure to or that we have access to, but they are selling it on that. We saw that. If I could jump back into the spreadsheet, you can see here. It's similar to, if you look here, the 1950 call, it's similar to what we would see with the NASDAQ. But if we jump back to here, you can see that they are on, let me just pull up the intraday trades so I can show you the actual ticker. Pull this down here. You can see this one is on NDXP, and same thing on the S&P 500. So very similar products, but we do not have access to it in the market. But that being said, so they pay out every single week. They write 0-day options each and every single day. There was a question that was asked during a couple of weeks ago when we had that massive downturn in the market. Obviously, all their covered calls expired worthless. And so the data was showing that they should have paid out 93 cents a share. They only paid out 47 cents a share. And so there was a question asked, like, why were we not paid out this? What happened to this money? Why was it not distributed? And this was actually pretty telling information. So they said that the entire, obviously they're trying to balance the objectives here, but one is NAV protection. The other being that they are trying to manage how much they actually pay out, right? So if they have this massive payout in 1 week, and then the next week this minimal payout, or a few weeks down a minimal payout, it doesn't provide that income to shareholders that they are looking for. Obviously, we're all in here for the income. That's why we own this fund, is to set it, forget it, and collect the income every single week. And so they kind of are balancing the distributions, and they are managing the distribution. So they're not necessarily keeping that money. They're just splitting it out over the week. You saw last week, they didn't have the greatest success when it comes to their wins and losses. And so they probably took some of that cash that they had on hand that they made from that huge downturn in the market, and then they split it up a little bit into the weeks to give us a more even distribution. We know that the distribution so far has been around 30 to 31 cents each and every single week for QDTE. And so when they have those big up weeks like that, where there's high IV and they win massively, they're spreading that out. So you can see here this week on the NASDAQ side of things, they had a loss here. This one went in the money. Same with the S&P 500 on Monday, they went in the money. On Tuesday, we won. Both of these expired worthless. Both of these calls expired worthless. I'm not sure why this is changing to the date format. On Wednesday, we won both of those as well. And then today we have the 1990 and the 5650. Let's see if they're going to expire worthless. They were paid. You can just see these massive ones, right? So on this win, 345,000, 67,000, 347,000. And then today's calls for 396,000. And on the S&P 500, 89,000. So if they have more wins than losses, as long as they're able to manage those, then there's massive W's in terms of the weekly distribution. So just a couple of things to look for if you're tracking it. Just know if you're tracking these intraday trades, obviously if we win more than we lose, then the dividend is going to be pretty good. If it's a massive win on the week, they may hold back some of the funds. If it's a massive loss on the week, you'd think this last payment was expected to be between that 16 and 17 cent. Obviously, it was in the 47 cents, so you wonder where the heck did that money come from? Well, it's from the weeks that they had massive wins. They held a little bit of that capital, and then they paid it out, right? So the goal with the long shares on these long covered calls, these long deep in the money covered calls, is for them to appreciate. And towards probably the end of the year, as you get closer to those expirations, they may close out of those and open longer dated options into 2026 as we get close to the end of this year. And we may see some of that pass through as dividends. He wasn't very clear on that in the actual interview. So another thing, we kind of talked about it a little bit, is they use flex options. They're not trading the traditional ETFs. They're using those micros to have more precision for the long exposure. Sometimes they do that so that they have smaller contracts and they can have more contracts. And so they're utilizing those flex options. Right now, there's just the 2 long calls. There may be more long calls or more strikes in the future. I know that they did just have 1 at the start. Now they obviously have 2. And that he said that there may be some more coming soon. So as the fund grows and they have more AUM, they're going to move the strikes around. But the one thing is they're going to continue to sell options each and every single day. They will sell covered calls every day, no matter what. He did make that very clear, especially on this new RDT that is coming. They will, just like QDTE and XDTE, they will continue to sell those calls each and every single day, no matter what. And you can find those on this website in the intraday trades. So that is great to know. They have the 2 primary objectives, which is income and NAV protection. So good thing there. Another thing they did talk about as well is most people are buying this, or they're buying these to have a retirement, right? Like, so let's say you put $100,000 into this. You want to collect a paycheck each and every single week. You use this to pay your bills. You use this to get debt. You use this for whatever, right? So if that is your objective, well, what is this fund going to do for you, right? So if you want to live off these funds, the advice from them is if you want to live off these, there was no like, hey, if you don't drip this, these funds aren't going to work. He said most of the investors use this fund for income. They take the cash out. So unlike other funds, there is not as much of a requirement to drip or to maintain your principal investment. So there was not a clear yes or no, but it was nice to hear that if you don't drip, you still could get your capital back. Obviously, in a tax scenario, there's a return on capital, in this. So the objective for them is not to have to build a fund that you have to drip. And so that's nice to see as an investor, but definitely a big takeaway. They want to have the least amount of NAV reduction as they can. Obviously, if the markets absolutely fall apart, then it may be, it's just that's the market, right? They talked about stock splits. They don't have a policy for stock splits. Obviously, if the price gets down to a certain level, they may be forced to do a stock split. We've seen it in many other funds. As the NAV erosion eats down at the stock, they've had to split. So they didn't really talk a whole lot about this. But if they have to do it, obviously they have to do it. As far as the SEC filings that are out as of right now, the RDTE, we talked about that. That's going to be coming in early September. I think this one may be a great one going forward as we get into the rate reductions, because a lot of these small companies have high debt loads, and rate reduction is going to definitely help the stocks in the Russell. So that one's coming out in September. They also did file for a target managed distribution product that we will see coming soon. They talked about one that is a fund that's coming out that is literally a non-income fund for people that don't want to take income. And then they're also coming out with a target managed distribution. The idea for that fund is going to be, there's going to be no daily options. They're not going to be paying weekly. And it'll be something that at the beginning of the year, there's a set distribution that pays on a monthly basis, and it's going to be between 10 and 20%, right? So there's a set distribution, 10 to 20%, and it'll pay that the entire year, and then they'll redistribute and they'll refigure it out at the end of each year. There are funds out there, I think on E-Trade, like Cornerstone is one of them, but they're looking at something like that, but not a weekly payer. He did stress that. And the target fund will be on the S&P 500, but he had no extra ET to share on that. So a lot of really good information. They're obviously a newer fund. They're open to a lot of ideas. The CEO is really cool. It's great to see these things on drip. I know we've run a lot of calculators on if you were to drip these, how crazy it could get. This is obviously at the top. One of the ones we have that I share here for free is just in the sheets that you can look at a drip. If you were to put, I think this is for 100 shares, right? Yeah, 100 shares, which is what I have. If you dripped it for 10 years, you could have over 1.3 million. So a lot of potential here. The distributions are looking good. I did actually throw in here, I thought this would be of interest. let's see, what sheet did I put it on? My actual drip calculations. So right now I have about 4,300 invested. I have 100 shares. I've been paid out 3 times, $32.51 the first week, $30.40 the second week, $35.03 the third week. And then this one coming Friday, based off of what they shared, should be around 47. I've gone from 57 shares to 100 shares as of right now. I have dripped a total of, if you grab these two, 1.54 shares so far on drip. This next one will obviously be bigger. I have been scaling into these more and more. So this is my personal this is what I've seen. Obviously, the drip is just getting started, but I just want to track this over time to see exactly how it is for me. But yeah, just wanted to provide this update. I went through about a 35-minute interview and just wanted to grab some of the key points on XDTE and RTT after we listened to the RoundHill CEO, Dave Mazza. So thank you, everybody. As always, don't forget to drop a like. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll catch you next week. Happy investing.